Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the official podcast of the best source on the internet for all the news, scouting, insight, and more that you want on the Boston Red Sox farm system. Thank you for the download or stream. My name is Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor and podcast host for SoxProspects.com, and I'm coming to you from Sox Prospects Mid-Atlantic here in our nation's capital. Joined, as always, from Massachusetts by my co-hosts, Sox Prospects Director of Scouting Ian Kundle and Managing Editor Matt Hegel. We've got a great show for you today, lots to talk about. It's been about a month. We apologize and appreciate you sticking with us. I had a family trip followed by my mother coming into town, preceded by a bunch of work stuff. So it's been a minute, but back on the horn for you. Lot to talk about. Matt, what's new, my man?
Nothing much. Just been sad without any podcast to record with you guys. But no, I'm happy to be back on now today.
Wonderful. Ian, what's new with you, my man? Out at the fields?
Yeah, just been going to a bunch of games, checking out the new draftees, seeing some home runs being hit. So it's been a good couple weeks, even though we, unfortunately, as Matt said, haven't been able to record.
And Matt's been at the field too. Matt's been at Lowell. He's got a piece going up on the news page that I will be editing today. We've got some scouting reports that went up this morning. Will be going up today, hopefully, as well. Ian has had a bunch of stuff on the news page, like 3 scouting scratches, a trade analysis, and a transaction analysis. So make sure you check out news.soxprospects.com for all of that good stuff. Before we get into the content today, a couple things to get out of the way first. Make sure you subscribe and rate and review. It really helps us get into some new ears. You can subscribe on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play Music. I think we're on there's a radio app on my phone, TuneIn, thank you, that we're on as well. And we're also now officially on YouTube, so you can check out the podcast on YouTube right next to all of the great first-hand scouting video that we get from the fields, thanks to Ian and sometimes to Chaz as well. Our scouting department, so you can listen to us on YouTube. Subscribing is the easiest way for you to know when there's new episodes, so it's an easy way for you to keep up with when new episodes go up. Also, a thank you to the Ludlow Thieves for our intro/outro music, All the Money. Go check them out on iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, however it is that you listen to music. We love getting your emails, so send those to podcast@soxprospects.com. We have a bunch of emails to read for you today, from you today. But if we don't hit on something today, make sure you send it in, because if you want to hear about it, we want to talk about it. Quick note, we've got one question from Twitter, but generally the email is the safest way to get questions in, because we kind of have a lot of back and forth with you guys on Twitter, a lot of conversations, a lot of questions that we'll answer on Twitter. So Twitter questions for the podcast can kind of get lost in the shuffle, but so the email's a little safer. Speaking of Twitter, make sure you're following the site's main Twitter account at Sox Prospects. My account is at SP Chris Hatfield. Matt, what's yours?
At Matt Hegel, MattHuegel.
And Ian, how about you?
At Ian Kundle, IANCUNDALL.
All right, wonderful. And without further ado, we should probably get into all of the happenings since our last episode. Like I said, it's been a minute, so this one bit is about 3 weeks old and actually happened just after. It was the day after I caught the Red Sox out in Seattle, because that's where my family was, but my wife's family. But Andrew Benintendi made his debut in the major leagues, got his call up. Unsurprisingly, I think that was something that we had been talking about a little bit as at least a possibility, if not a certainty in the coming weeks. But Benintendi is now up with the Boston Red Sox. He's the starting left fielder. As of today, he's hitting .327 with a .375 on base percentage and .423 slugging percentage. Yet to hit his first home run, because I think he hit the one that got called back, basically, on replay. Gentlemen, what do we think about Benintendi getting the call? It really makes a lot of sense to me, because left field was this sort of black hole for the lineup. Why not run him out there and give him a shot? He couldn't really be any worse, and he's acquitting himself pretty well. Matt, what have you seen out of Benintendi so far?
Yeah, I mean, he's been really good. He puts in professional at bats. That's the best thing you can say about him in terms of looking the part of a major leaguer. And even if he's been fairly hot, besides maybe at first, but he doesn't look out of place. And I going back to when he first got called up, I thought maybe it was a little bit early, and then it was weird how I couldn't tell if it seemed almost like a disagreement between Dombrowski in the front office and Farrell or something, because he wasn't playing much, and I wasn't really sure what was going on with that in terms of they're platooning him, and then they were kind of pinch hitting Brock Holt for Brent's, at times instead of Benintendi. So it was a little weird, but now he's really gotten to be sort of the everyday guy, and he's sort of settling in. Looks fine in left field. Maybe a few problems with dealing with the wall at Fenway so far, but generally, looks fine, and I think he's putting in professional at bats. The power, should come. We've seen some power out of him, like you said, the home run that got called back, and some doubles, and he's also stolen some bases. So, I mean, it really has gone about as well as you could hope at this point.
Yeah, he got called up after about 63 games in Portland at age 22, and I think it was you who said, I think, what we can expect out of him early on in the call-up. He's struggled at a couple of levels. I know we've read that he only had the short adjustment period in Portland, but people forget he had about a week or two in Lowell where he had a bit of an adjustment period. Are you surprised by what he's done so far, or is this about what you expected?
No, this is about what I expected. He's hitting for high average, striking out a little more than I expect, but that's, there's an adjustment level definitely from AA pitching to the big leagues. And as Matt said, not hitting for much power, which I mentioned in the transaction analysis that James Dunn and I wrote up, that I don't think this year you'll see his power potential. He's always, as you said, been a kind of a slow starter, but he's been kind of a stabilizing force out there. And when they were running out some combination of Bryce Brent's, Brock Holt out there, and I think for the year they were hitting something like 240, 300, 380 or something. I had it in the article, but the triple slash from Red Sox left fielders before him, and he's come up. He's hit over 300, albeit in a small sample size. OBP is 367. Slugging's a little down, but he's getting on base. He's been a good way to turn the lineup over from the bottom of the order. And obviously, before they changed the order up, that was really beneficial to Mookie Betts, I think, because he's actually had people on base ahead of him rather than in the past where he was kind of coming up with nobody on base. So I think he's been pretty good for them, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen when Chris Young gets activated, whether they do go to a platoon, even though he doesn't really show any noticeable splits, or they just keep running Benintendi out every day, and maybe Young plays, a day in left field, day in center, day in right, something like that.
Mm-hmm. That slash line is 258, 324, 397 that they were getting out of left field before the call-up. So
yeah, it's not good.
No, you need a little better from that position. It's funny you mentioned Chris Young, who is currently on a rehab assignment in Pawtucket. Who do you think he would be ready kind of soon because he's been down there for a minute? But
yeah, it's been a pretty long rehab assignment.
Yeah. So it hasn't been the 3 games. Of course, he was out for a little while, but Young.
I don't think they've needed him really either, though.
Yeah,
right.
He's got at least 7 games now.
Yeah, he got placed on the rehab assignment on the 11th. So yeah, that's part of it. But yeah, needing him is probably part of it too. That's a very good point. Very, very good point. Worth mentioning too, Benintendi, although he has those numbers, the average on balls in play is above 400 right now, so you'd expect that to come down a little bit. So we'll see how he's able to adjust when the balls maybe aren't falling in quite as well. But it'll be interesting to follow that going forward. The other top 2 prospect thing that happened during our break is that Yoan Moncada did make his debut at third base. However, of course, between his an ankle injury that also happened while we were on our hiatus, as well as some poor rain in Portland, some poor weather, not poor rain. Rain's always poor. Some poor weather in Portland and on the road when they've been playing. He's only got a couple of games at third base. He was out from he played on August the 5th, which was I think the game where he injured his ankle. Sat until the 11th where he played second base. The next day on the 12th he played third, and he didn't play at all from the 12th until yesterday on the 20th. Both of those games, quote, back-to-back, which, I mean, not really back-to-back, but both of those games he played third base. He was clean in the first game. Yesterday on the 20th, he did make a throwing error from third, which, happens. But he's definitely going to have some adjusting to do at third base. I have kind of made the point, guys, that to me the fact that they are making this move in season shows me that they are considering bringing him up, no matter what, say, Dave Dombrowski or John Farrell is saying publicly to the media. I personally think they would have waited for him to start learning third base until the Fall Instructional League and the Arizona Fall League, where he's already slated to go reportedly. I think they would have waited until then, let him kind of do it outside of the limelight. But I think the fact that they're doing it now, the fact that Travis Shaw has really struggled since May. Since May, Travis Shaw has an on-base percentage below 300. He's just really not getting it done at third base these days. I think that combination of factors makes him a potential call-up, either in September, ankle permitting, obviously. Am I crazy here, or is this something that you think sounds about right, Ian?
No, I think it's a possibility. I mean, I actually, like, back when he got promoted, I said on Twitter that I think that he'll be playing third base after a few weeks adjustment period, which is what ended up happening with the eye towards a call-up. And they've kind of shown, I think we got to remember that how he was treated in spring training, where he spent a lot of time with the big league club, much longer than anyone who's not on the, as we talked about, I think who's not on the 40-man. We talked about, I think, with Pete Abe back then. And so he has had some exposure, at least to like being around the team and John Farrell and everything. And I think they just don't want to put any unnecessary expectations or pressure on him. And so by continuing to play it coy with the media, I think they're just trying to like limit expectations. And as we saw with the Benintendi promotion, that kind of came out of nowhere. Like nobody was speculating on that at that point. Like people were talking about it later in August. So I think that realistically, if he can just show he's healthy and then hit a little bit more, that it's definitely something that is in the cards or could be in the cards, considering, as you said, Shaw is kind of regressing to what we expected him to do. And that's not an acceptable level of production at third base. And if it's not going to be Moncada, who else is it going to be? They don't have anyone else in the organization who's capable of playing it at this point this year, right now. So,
well, depends what you think of Aaron Hill. But Aaron Hill is what he is.
But I'd rather see an Aaron Hill Moncada platoon than like a Travis Shaw. Oh, wait, no, that wouldn't work. Yes, no, that would work. Yeah, I was right.
Yeah, well, that kind of actually brings me to the point I was going to make. But still in Double-A, hitting 5 for 30 against left-handers, 167, 286, 333 slash line, 17 strikeouts and 30 at bats. If he comes up, he's not playing versus left-handers, right? We can agree on this.
No, you can't. I mean, well, I was just actually, funny enough, I was doing some video stuff a couple nights ago, and one of them was we got some side view of Moncada hitting right-handed, and you can see in there it's just not as comfortable at all or fluid as his left-handed swing. It's definitely something that he's kind of fighting right now.
So it begs the question, and I know what your answer to this is going to be, but is this a situation where they're going to have to evaluate whether he should continue switch hitting or not?
No, you keep him switch hitting, but I think that it's something that is going to keep being brought up because even if he improves, which I think he will, because he's that kind of athlete. He has that feel for the game that I think he'll get better. It's never going to be like an equal from each side situation. He's always going to be his average OBP is going to be much better from the left side of the plate, even in his peak. And so, but it's just you don't want to like changing that right now would be pretty drastic, as he's probably never faced left-handed pitching from the left side of the plate and everything, and I think that would just slow down development.
I mentioned his split from the left side of the plate in Double-A, but from the right side in Double-A, 305, 379, 593, clearly showing, I think, at least from that side of the plate, that he is ready for at least Pawtucket. But of course, there's the defensive issue, and there's the there's the right-handed swing issue, right side of the plate versus left-handers issue. Matt, what do you think the chances are that he comes up? Is it certainty, health permitting?
I don't know. I think I'm a little less optimistic, I guess, about the move to third and meaning he'll come up right away. Like you guys are talking about, the swing from the left side of the plate, I mean, that could use some more development. And also defensively, I mean, at second, we always said, he looks like a great athlete, but he still has some stuff to smooth out. And I don't think he ever quite got to that point where he was, sort of very smooth at second. And now he's moved to third, which is, a harder transition than transition from center to left. And I think Benintendi was already more solid in center. So I think there might be some more work to do there as well. And just because he's moving in season, I think it might be the case where it got to the point where we can see Pedroia is holding down that position for the near future, and let's get him to a position where it makes sense as soon as possible. That's not to say though that like I get your guys' point as well, and the production from third base hasn't been there. The other thing I was sort of thinking about is it makes for an odd sort of bench construction if I guess you'd send Shaw down in that case. In that case, your backup first baseman would be Brock Holt, I would assume, which is a little bit weird, but I guess doable. But
see, I wouldn't send him down. I would keep Shaw up. I think right now, today the Red Sox are calling up Henry Owens and sending Devin Marrero down to AAA.
You got Chris Young coming up too, though.
Right. So I mean, it's going to be interesting. The more I look at it.
Well, no, but couldn't they? I feel like they could finagle it by like you can basically just play. Because does he have to be on the 40-man or does he have to be on the active roster before September 1st to be eligible for the playoffs? Just the 40-man.
You don't anymore.
40-man, I think,
but you don't anymore because if you've got a guy on the 60-day DL, which they've got,
they did the Mondesi last year. Yeah,
they've got 5 guys on the 60-day DL. They can add whoever they want.
Then I was going to say that they could just wait till September and then it's not an issue.
Right. Well, so there's the 25-man roster, and the 40-man is only at 39 right now anyway, so they wouldn't even have to DFA anybody.
Yeah, so that's a good point. But on September 1st, they can just add him to the – I mean, if they wanted to. I don't think he'd be added then, but they could, on September 1st, add him to the active roster without having to send down Shaw or make any roster move because they can just call up the 40-man guys. Right.
Well, and the point that I was making is that and you know what? This probably makes sense because Henry Owens is up to start, presumably because Stephen Wright's not. Well, Stephen Wright's on the DL.
No, because Rodriguez isn't going.
Rodriguez isn't going to be able to go. So Owens is up to make that start. I think my guess is what they're thinking is that Owens makes that start and gets sent down for Chris Young to get activated.
I would agree because I think they said that Rodriguez should be ready to go for his next start, or they hope he is.
So at that point, you've got a bench, quote unquote, of Brian Holiday, Aaron Hill, Chris Young, and Brock Holt. And I think you make a good point, Matt, that you really can't add Moncada to that mix unless you're sending Shaw down, and I don't think they want to send Shaw down. So
no, so I think it wouldn't happen until September. Matt's point about the defense is a good one though, because it's no guarantee that he's going to be good at third base. He had tools at second base, and I think he could have eventually maybe been like an average defender there. But as you said, like with Pedroia, there's no point in playing him there because he's not going to play second base for the Red Sox, right or wrong, whatever you think about that. Mm-hmm. But there's no guarantee he's going to stick at third base either. He doesn't. He does some things in the infield that you don't really like. Like we've talked about it, the focus isn't really there always. It's pretty sloppy. It's just like the fundamentals are kind of lacking. And if they're lacking at second base, third base is a longer throw, requires different footwork that he hasn't really worked on before, and he's going to have less time over at third base. And some of that, and so if he was going to play at third base, it's not inconceivable that he might not do well at third base, and then we're looking at a situation where he's going to have to go to the outfield, and then that's going to raise a whole nother set of issues, considering that they have 3 above average or 2 really good outfielders right now, and then a third one who should be good someday. So that would be another issue, but I think that's more of an off-season discussion point. But I think that was a good point by Matt.
Right. All right, so that's an issue that bears watching, particularly to see how often he's back in the lineup at this point, because he definitely needs to start playing every day before that's even an option. Another question that I got actually in a radio hit this past week is if there's anybody else who can come up and help down the stretch. We've mentioned Moncada and Benintendi, obviously. The big area of concern for a lot of people, obviously, is the bullpen. But just generally, are there any names that stick out to you guys in terms of names who could come up and help this team out from Pawtucket down the stretch? I know I've got a couple that really come to mind, but being the generous person that I am, I'll throw to you guys first, maybe a name or 2 each, and then we'll just kind of round out if there's anybody else that hasn't been hit on yet. But Matt, 1 or 2 guys that you look at maybe on that Pawtucket or even perhaps Portland roster who could come up down the stretch and help this team, bullpen or otherwise.
Yeah, I think the two most obvious ones for me are from Pawtucket are Joe Kelly and Kyle Martin, the two bullpen arms. Kyle Martin's been really good, kind of sneakily this season, and I was even looking at his stats from the last few weeks recently, or the last like month and a half or so, and he's been even better. Tons of strikeouts, everything you want to see, pretty much. So I'm interested in seeing Kyle Martin getting a shot. I'm actually kind of surprised that he hasn't up to this point.
Same.
But I guess there hasn't really been a situation now that Pat Light's gone. Maybe he gets a little more of a shot. So yeah, those two are for potential bullpen guys.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of knows the Joe Kelly story at this point, but yeah, Martin so far this year in Pawtucket, he started the year. Oh no, he's been in Pawtucket the whole year, but 33 appearances, 20 games finished. Interestingly, 5 saves, 61 in a third inning, 76 strikeouts, a WHIP of 1.14. I'll pull up some of the recent stats that Matt referred to. He pitched yesterday and actually threw 3 shutout innings, striking out 4, which is really helpful, but. Really, other than one mishap, he had one kind of rough appearance on the 30th of July. In his last 14 appearances dating back to June 20th, 30 innings, 17 hits and 12 walks, 38 strikeouts. He's given up 6 runs, and 4 of those were in one game. Batting average against of 170. He's really doing a good job. Ground ball percentage of 48% in those appearances. So anyway, I agree. He's a guy that I think could get a shot. I think they've got guys they could designate for assignment very easily from the 40-man roster. As you mentioned, there's one spot open. I think Williams Jerez is a guy who might be the next one in danger of having his spot taken. I think Brian Holiday's spot is entirely dependent on whether Hannigan is ready or not. So if Hannigan were to come off the DL, I think Brian Holiday is a guy you could jettison. So there's ways to make room for sure on the roster right now. Ian, in addition to those two guys, you can touch on them too if you want, but anyone who comes to mind from that Pawtucket roster or Portland who could come up and help down the stretch?
Yeah, Martin was the number one guy after Kelly for me. I've actually been kind of on this, talking about that on Twitter every couple of weeks. I'll send out some tweet about how I don't understand why he hasn't gotten a shot yet. And I think it's not just the numbers though. He has a secondary pitch that will get big league hitters out, and that's what separates him. Like, I'd rather have him than both Heath Hembry and Noe Ramirez, who have been up at various times this year.
That's the changeup you're referring to?
Yeah, his changeup is really good. It's a plus changeup, and it's not like he's a soft tosser either. He's 6'7", he throws 92 to 95. He has locate his changeup. He has a slider that it's not a great slider, but it's something that he sequences well. Doesn't throw and doesn't get it overly exposed, and he can use steal a strike when he needs to. But the changeup is a true weapon pitch, and that's I think what kind of separates him from Ramirez and Hembry for me. I think I'm not going to steal the one I think you're going to talk about, because I noticed you've been talking about this guy a little more recently on Twitter.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go under the radar and jump down to Double-A and talk about Luis Isla. And I know that I think this is very, very unlikely, but he has to be added to the 40-man this offseason anyway. Or I think is he already on the 40-man, or is it off?
No, he's one of the ads, remember?
Offseason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with how bad Fernando Abad has been since he's been pretty Abad since they got him, they might need to. I had to. It was just sitting there. It was like a fastball right down the middle. I had to.
Love how casual you were about it.
Yeah, and so they could use another lefty, and since I'm not taking the one you're going to take, I'm going to mention I think Isla has an outside opportunity to get a shot. If you look at his overall numbers aren't that impressive, but if you look over the last 3 months, or since, what is it? I think there's some cutoff. It's like June 1st or something. He's been much better with Portland. He's striking a ton of guys out, and he's not giving up as many hits. I'm trying to see if I can aggregate the stats, which I can't. But it's something like in 25, 26 innings, he struck out 30-plus guys, giving up like less than a hit an inning. He's not walking anyone.
I'm on there. What's the split you want?
From June 1st on?
From June 1st on, in 20 appearances, 29 innings, 20 hits, 10 walks, 38 strikeouts.
Yeah, he's missing a ton of bats. And something seems to have changed, because before that he wasn't missing really many bats. He was walking a ton of guys. And the stuff is legit. Like, from the left side, it's the best stuff in the system in terms of relief profile. He'll run his fastball up to 97. Secondary pitches are both like average-ish, but with that fastball. He's got a tough arm slot. I think he could be pretty effective against left-handed hitters should they want to go that route.
Mm-hmm,
And then I guess,
go ahead.
do you want a position player or not?
It's up to you.
If they're going to do a position player, actually, no, we already know all the position players, so there's no one really off the radar that I was going to pump up Ryan Lamar because he went to Michigan, but I'll let that slide.
I was going to say him too as for September as a
he's been really
guy.
good. Yeah, he's been really good. He could be the pitcher, and he can pitch if they need to.
Bit,
so, yep, he can run a little bit, big arm in left field, and he can pitch. So that's why you should. And he's really smart, so that's why you should consider pulling up Ryan. So much smarter than anyone who's Brown or stupid schools like that or Virginia.
Good work. Okay, well, the first guy I'll mention is not the one Ian was alluding to, and I think he's a guy a lot of people have forgotten about, but I think Christian Vasquez is a pretty obvious guy to come up. He's been working on his swing down at Pawtucket. I was reading an article the other day. I unfortunately can't remember who it was by. I'm going to assume it was either Tim Britton or Brian McPherson of the Projo or Alex Spear. But apparently, at some point during the offseason, he picked up a leg lift, which he was not doing prior to his Tommy John surgery last year. So they're trying to get him back to more of a toe tap timing device at the plate and not leaking forward during his at-bats. And he was not very good at first while he was down there, but he's starting to pick things up a little bit. In his last 17 games, he's hitting 290, 343, 419, which is not setting the world on fire, but he's not a guy who they're relying on to set the world on fire at the plate, and especially with the injury to Blake Swihart, and who knows what his future is behind the plate going forward, at least in the near term. He's a guy who they might want to be counting on to start the season next year as the starting catcher. I don't know, even with the breakout, if you could call it that Sandy Leon is having, that you can rely on him going to next season. So I think they would like to get a look in the major league level at Christian Vasquez going forward this year. The other guy that I want to mention, as Ian has said, Fernando Abad was acquired to be one of two lefties in the bullpen with Robbie Ross and has not been very good. I think this is a long shot, maybe not quite as long of a shot as Luis Gisla, because I think that they would be okay with calling this guy up, adding him to the 40-man roster, and then DFAing him off of it. But Robbie Scott in Pawtucket has been kind of the swing guy, but at the same time, he's been very good as their swing guy, and I think they more rely on him as the swing guy just because they know that he can give them innings in a kind of, starting the bullpen game type role. I mean, in his last 5 appearances, 3 of them have been starts. But on the season versus left-handers, Robbie Scott has allowed a 149, 196, 230 slash line. So that's a 426 OPS. If you look at it versus left-handers, let's see, in 88 plate appearances, they have 79 at-bats. That's 17 hits. He has struck out 21 in 79 at-bats. He's been really good against left-handers, and he's a guy who the stuff isn't great. Ian, you could probably speak to it a little better than I, but throws from multiple arm slots, mixes it up, kind of more of a crafty left-hander, I think would be an apt descriptor for him. But, I mean, on the season, his whip is below 1. He's striking out 70 guys in 73 and 2/3 innings, and I think it'd be a great story for a guy who was an undrafted free agent, went to the NABL, pitching for Yuma. I don't even know what the NABL is. I'm guessing North American Baseball League. North American League, yeah. Signed out of there after going to Florida State University, my wife's alma mater. I'm sure that'll make her happy. But they signed him out of there as an undrafted free agent / indie ball guy, and he just kind of... He's had a very good year. He had a pretty good year last year. He's had a very good year this year for Pawtucket, and I'd like to see him get a shot, although I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know. Ian, you've seen him this year. I don't know how often you or Matt have seen him, but stuff-wise, is anything there for you? Or is it just kind of a, it's nice that you had a good year, but we're not interested type situation?
Yeah, I mean, he gets by. It's deception. It's deception, mixing pitches, and, just changing the arm slots up, as you said, because he tops out at like 87, 88 miles an hour. But, I mean, as we've kind of seen, the bar for left-handed relievers, especially if you're a really good loogie, is low. So, yeah, I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He'd be used as a loogie. And you know what?
As long as you don't overexpose him. You have to keep him in that role. But
yeah, if he gets a couple of left-handers out down the stretch in September in big spots, where you're limiting his exposure, but you're able to keep him on the roster because it expands to 40. I think that's a nice spot for him. And then, like I said, I don't think they'd have any problem with DFAing him off the roster next year. He'd probably go unclaimed, and if he does get claimed, you tip your hat and say, hey, good luck with that other organization. I hope you get a shot.
Well, yeah, it's like you look at Tommy Lane stuck on the roster for far longer than I thought he would,
right?
And it's the similar profile,
right?
So I wouldn't rule it out,
right? All right. Kind of along those lines, we do still get asked a little bit about promotions and whether guys are going to be promoted, and there's a couple of issues that come up when we talk about this. First of all, I think what a lot of people don't realize, the minor league season is almost over. If you look at the schedule,
so sad.
Yeah, the minor league season is almost over. The regular season ends the first week in September. I think the 5th is the final day of games in the minors. So, for example, we were counting the Greenville Drive have 15 games remaining. There really is not much of a point to calling guys up at this point. The two guys we probably get asked about more than anyone, or I guess there's three. Two of them are the next two guys up who have played at least in the rankings, and Rafael Devers and Michael Kopech, who are both kind of making a mockery of the Carolina League right now, and it certainly look like they're ready to go up to Portland. And the other guy is Nuri Tavares, an outfielder in Portland, who I'll ask you about in a minute, Ian. But there just really isn't an opportunity for those guys to get more than a brief look in Portland. And I think the biggest deal in terms of Devers and Kopech is that the Salem Red Sox have already clinched a playoff spot by virtue of winning the first half in their division in the Carolina League. So they are definitely playoff bound. They're not even in a playoff race. On the other hand, Portland is in last in their division and therefore is certainly not going to the playoffs. So there's really no point in calling them up. The thing I've kind of wondered about privately is that whether the Red Sox might consider calling up maybe Kopech for a start or two in Portland and then demote him back down for the playoffs. I don't think they'll do that. It's just whether that's something that maybe Dombrowski might suggest, but I don't think they'll do that. Maybe that's a possibility, but at the same time, maybe you just want to keep those guys locked in their roles in Salem and getting them ready for the playoffs and getting that playoff experience. I mean, even from Kopech's perspective, you want him to stay down there and get that experience just to get more innings because he needs to make up innings from missing much of the first half of the season with his broken hand. So I think we can agree that there's really no one getting promoted at this point. The other question is just basically looking at the playoff situations in the minors. We know where the Red Sox stand. They're a half game out behind Toronto in the East. I didn't realize they're 2 games up on Baltimore at this point, but that's good to see. But if you look at in the International League, Pawtucket, they're in 4th place in their division, and they're kind of screwed because their division is much better than the other 2 divisions in the International League, where they are also in 3rd in the wild card behind the 2nd and 3rd place teams in their division. They're 9.5 games out. That's realistically not going to happen. Portland, as we mentioned, is in last. They're not going to the playoffs. Salem has clinched a playoff spot. They're already in, and they're actually fighting for the second half title in their division as well, trying to go pole to pole. Greenville is 4.5 games back for the second half title in the Southern Division of the South Atlantic League. They have a shot. There's 15 games left. They have, I think, 1 series against Augusta and 2 against Rome, you said, Ian, after looking, who are the 2 teams ahead of them. So they could certainly make up some ground. You would like to see them make the playoffs because you want guys to get that experience. But as far as the question of whether guys could get called up from Greenville should they miss the playoffs, to Salem, I know we mentioned a few names. To me, part of the problem is that maybe if, Michael Chavis is a guy who I'm sure that they didn't plan on spending the entire season in Greenville, the third baseman. He was hot at the beginning of the year, got hurt, and just really hasn't been the same guy. Much as you might like to see him get called up to Salem, the fact of the matter is they have Rafael Devers at third, and I'm sure they want him getting the everyday at-bats at third. Josh Ockamy has had a great year. He has been scuffling for about a month and a half at this point, I think. Personally, tell me if you guys disagree, but I think it's just a matter of a guy hitting a wall in his first full season. I don't really have that much that I'm concerned about with Ockamy. He's hitting, I think, 150 or something over the past month or so. But again, he's a first baseman. Salem has Nick Longy at first base. I don't think they're necessarily going to call up Ockamy to split time with Longy or even maybe to split first base DH at bats, although they could. The guy that you guys mentioned is a guy who you think might get called up is Luis Alexander Basabe. What do you think there, Ian? You're the guy who's seen him. Do you think that that's a situation where you think he can handle it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he might struggle a bit because, I mean, he's aggressive. There's a lot of swing and miss in his game, but I don't think there's anything blocking him really in the outfield with Salem, other than these guys have been with us all year. Excuse me. It's not not a great. It's kind of a tough look if these guys have got us in the playoff situation and then we're kind of putting them out of the way for another prospect. But I could see them maybe bringing him up as in like a bench role because he's a good defender. He can run and kind of just provide some depth up there. Because right now, their bench outfielder is Jace Ray, who's more of an organizational guy. So if they wanted to do that, just to give him a brief exposure to Salem, I wouldn't rule it out, as I think it's likely he starts next year in Salem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. And plus, as we're going to talk about, Basabe is a guy who they need to make a 40-man roster decision on, even though he's only in low A right now. So maybe seeing him at that level could be useful scouting-wise. Looking at the lineup Salem has been using lately, Jordan Procession's the primary catcher, Longy's the primary first baseman. Their primary second baseman has been Jose Sermo, who is a guy that they if you haven't heard of him, don't worry about it. They signed him out of the Indie Leagues mid-season. Deanna Lopez has been the shortstop, so maybe they could see. I could see maybe a Mitchell Gonzalez coming up and playing second or something. Although Sermo's got some pop, so maybe they want to play him. Primary third baseman obviously has been Devers, and the outfield has been basically Yosef Monhe has been this primary center fielder, and then the corners have been a combination of Mike Myers, Brian Hudson, Jace Ray. I guess Danny Mars has been hurt because he hasn't played in 4 games. So maybe that opens up a spot for them in the outfield. But the DH has been rotating. They don't really have a primary DH. They've been moving a few guys around there. Jordan Betts hasn't been playing a lot lately, but he gets in there. But there's an opportunity to call some guys up. I could also see maybe Tate Matheny getting a shot to come up and play some corner outfield, especially if Danny Mars is hurt and isn't going to be playing. And Kyrie Washington has had a good year, but I think I think Matheny's the more likely guy to get the call up there than Washington or Kemp. So maybe Basabe and Matheny. I don't know. It's also kind of interesting that they've got 3 active catchers right now too.
Maybe one's DHing?
Not really. Not really, actually. They've got, Ben Moore isn't really playing very much. I think he just got activated off the DL, and he DH'd yesterday. So it would be interesting to see if they start playing him more. Maybe they deactivate David Sapilka to call up one of the outfielders.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on, because if Greenville is in it right to the end, they're not going to call anyone up. So I think it'll just depend on if Greenville is eliminated or not.
Right. Just to, I guess, finish things out, we should mention that Lowell is presently leading their division in the New York Penn League, the Stedler division, by 2 games on Connecticut, so they're in a playoff run. So I wouldn't plan on seeing anybody called up from there, especially because the short seasons run longer than the full seasons. The Gulf Coast League Red Sox are a game out of first place in the Gulf Coast League South. In the Dominican Summer League, not that anyone would come up from there, but it's worth mentioning that both DSL Red Sox teams lead their division. The DSL Red Sox 2 are 46-20, so that's a .697 win percentage, and the DSL Red Sox 1 are 45-17 for a ridiculous .726 winning percentage. I have no idea why those 2 teams are winning so much, but it's nice to see. It's nice to see. Culture of winning, gentlemen. There's a culture.
Can they
of
play each other in the championship?
Sure. Yeah, they definitely.
That is
could.
a thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, why couldn't they?
I don't know.
I don't know
if they.
Well, I'm just saying if they. No, they're in different divisions. They're in the Boca Chica Northeast and Northwest divisions. So yeah, I think the way it works in the Gulf Coast League, there are 6 divisions. I thought there used to be 5 divisions and a wild card. So maybe they just get 6 division winners at this point. But at any point, I think the way they do it is 2 teams get buys, which, looking at the standings right now, the .726 winning percentage DSL Red Sox 1 would not get one of the 2 buys. They have the 3rd best record, or 4th best record. Sorry. But yeah, those 2 teams could easily they might play each other in the first round. looking at it right now if the playoffs were to start tomorrow. So
That'd be awkward.
that'd be very awkward. But interesting nonetheless. Yeah, so good culture of winning stuff going on down there. A few other things we should touch on. We've got a couple of quick notes to hit. First off, Jason Groom debuts tomorrow, guys. On Monday the 22nd, he is going to make his Gulf Coast League debut, 1 or 2 innings with a pitch limit. So not going to be anything big, but it will be nice to see him finally get on the mound. I think the plan probably still to get him a couple of starts down there and maybe get him a brief look in Lowell, or do you think we're running out of time there?
I think he'll make a start in Lowell. I think kind of like Logan Allen, maybe he'll pitch his last start of the year in
Lakins.
Lowell. Or Lakins, sorry, yeah. Get it.
Well, both
Logan
of them.
Allen.
They both
Logan
did.
Allen did it too, but you get an inning, get a 2-inning stint in the last week of the season, something like that.
Yeah. Lowell does only go through the 5th, though, apparently. I was wrong on that. I thought they went longer. Oh, I think they cut down the length of the season. That's I remember that's a thing that happened this year. They moved it. Oh no, they moved it earlier or something. So they play the same number of games, but I think they start sooner.
Yeah, I think they only have one more homestand after Monday, and it's only 3 games. So that would be nice if he pitched in one of those games, and I could go talk to him afterwards.
Well, let's see. So he starts on the. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, because it's Monday. It's Saturday.
Yeah, it's Monday,
So
Saturday. Those are on the road.
If they played in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
If he starts in Connecticut, though, I'd probably go for that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because Saturday and then 5 days rest would be Thursday, right?
Yeah.
So that would be Thursday, the September 1st in Connecticut.
It'd be a trek, but it would be worth it.
Yeah, definitely. We'll pay your mileage if you do that. All right, yeah, so that's happening. The trade of Pat Light for Fernando Abad happened. We didn't talk about it, so we should probably mention it. I don't really have much to talk about there. Do either of you? Ian, you wrote the trade analysis piece.
Yeah, go read it. That's my thoughts.
I was just gonna say quickly that I'm kind of surprised that they didn't promote him directly to the majors. He's doing similar kind of stuff in AAA as he was in Pawtucket. So he has 6 strikeouts in 7 innings and 1.00 WHIP. So 2.57 ERA. So he's just kind of doing his thing. It'll probably be a September call up. But that I don't know. Abad hasn't been great, but I think we kind of agree that Pat Light isn't any huge loss.
Yeah, I was okay with it, especially because Abad had been a good in Minnesota. He'd been doing well in a bullpen that had been pretty bad, frankly. So not that he was lights out or anything, but I was okay with that move personally. And maybe next time out we'll have to remember. Next time out we'll maybe do a follow up on guys who've been traded. Dion Lewis needs knee surgery. That's sad. But
what?
yeah.
This isn't the Patriots podcast. Let's keep on point, please.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Well, the other alert that I got while we've been recording is that John Henry called David Ortiz unreplaceable, which, no kidding. I don't know why that was a news alert. Anyway.
You think?
I don't know. Again, no idea why that was a news alert. But yeah, happy trails to Pat Light. Good guy from when I've talked to him. Best of luck with Minnesota. All right, so maybe 2 more. Let's just do the AFL. We'll table the 40-man discussion. I know we got an email about the 40-man discussion, but we're at about 45 minutes. So let's do a quick discussion of our predictions of who's going to play in the Arizona Fall League, because that announcement is imminent. The 40-man roster situation isn't going to happen until the off-season, and it can be informed by who gets September call-ups. So, for example, if they give Yohan Moncada a call-up. So we're going to table the 40-man discussion, I think, guys, until the next podcast or one after that. But we did want to touch briefly on the Arizona Fall League. Every year we kind of get the questions of who do we think is going to go to the Arizona Fall League. And just to remind everyone, the Red Sox send usually 7 or 8 players to the Arizona Fall League to participate in the league. They play on a team with 5 prospects from 5 other teams. This year, I think Red Sox prospects will be playing for the surprise Seguaros. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. But it tends to be players from AA and above. I know the rule at least used to be, and I'm not sure if it's still the rule, but the rule used to be that a player had to be in at least AA, and you had like kind of one below AA guy you could call up. Not call up, but you had one sort of optional guy from high A or even lower if you really wanted to, but usually it's high A that you could send down there. So that's kind of the basis. The other thing that you must keep in mind as we're talking about this is that players who are from countries that have their own winter league, effectively the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and not a country, but Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico has its own winter league, cannot go to the Arizona Fall League. So, for example, you will not see Rafael Devers ever in the Arizona Fall League. You will not see who are some other candidates who would be from the Dominican. I know a lot of people have been asking about Enuri Tavares, who's had a great year for Portland. He's from the Dominican. He's going to play in the Dominican Winter League. Henry Ramos is not going to go to the AFL. He's from Puerto Rico. But that said, there are guys who we think could go. There's a number of guys who could definitely wind up going there. I know a couple of names that we agreed on. For one, Michael Kopech almost certainly will go. And Ian, you had, I think I agree with your kind of take on what they'll likely do with him.
Yeah, I think he'll finish the year up with Salem. Then I think he'll head to Instructs and continue to throw every 5 days there, pitching 5-6 innings to start, and then he'll go to the AFL because I was like, I didn't even realize how bad it is. He's way behind the innings number he needs. Like he threw 65 last year and he's at 48 this year. So they probably want him close to 100 innings, I would guess, for the year. And to get that, to get another 50 plus innings in when there's, he's got probably 3 more starts with Salem, that's another, after that, let's say he throws 15, 20 innings and that's still 30 more innings. He's going to need 2-3 Instruct starts and a couple in the AFL to get to 100, let alone like 120 or 130, which is, I think, what ideally they'd like him to get. So I think they're just going to try and keep him on his regular pitching schedule as possible, as late as possible into the season.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look last year, the kind of starter slot that the Red Sox had was split by Justin Haley and Aaron Wilkerson, and they combined to throw 21 innings over 6 starts. In theory, you would have Kopech going deeper into those games because he wouldn't be on necessarily a limit or anything of that sort. But I think you could expect him to maybe get 30 more innings in the AFL. So conservatively.
And so they'd still need another 20 to 40. So between the rest of the regular season and Instructs, I think that's doable to get him up to like 120.
Right.
Which might even be high considering he only threw 60 last year. Maybe the limit will be 100. Who knows?
So, Kopech likely goes. Some other guys we mentioned, there are a couple of from the Portland lineup. One that I will try and find the tweet so I can credit who reported it. But Yoan Moncada is apparently going to the Arizona Fall League to play third base, which makes a lot of sense, guys. What's your name? Matt. Jeez, sorry about that. but Matt, yes, definitely seems like that's the plan there. To send Moncada there makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think with the transition to third base, and he can continue to get innings, especially like with the time he's had off recently. I think he's a lock for sure.
Scott Lauber from the Boston Herald reported back on August 13th. He tweeted that Moncada is slated to play third base in the Arizona Fall League. That was according to John Farrell. So that's the plan for him. So thanks to Brian, who actually I think also sent in a question this week, but might be a different Brian. No, it's definitely a different Brian. But thanks to Brian to tweeting me that because I was on my trip or just coming back from my trip when that got tweeted out. So had not seen that. So Moncada's definitely going. We had some other predictions, guys. I think a near certainty would be shortstop Mauricio Dubon, who's doing really well for Portland right now. We mentioned if there's a catcher, it would probably be Jake Romanski from Portland, although I don't think that's necessarily certain, but I could definitely see it. So those seem like the obvious guys to me in the lineup. If they sent an outfielder, it would probably be someone like Cole Sturgeon, but I think it's far more likely that they send a Romanski, Moncada, Dubon offensive group. As far as pitchers, who do you guys see? I know we threw some names around. Matt, anyone you could think of there?
Yeah, it's a little bit tough. There's definitely a few names that more than in past years that could be interesting, especially on the starter side. I was looking at two guys, Stankiewicz and McAvoy, both who I'm not sure would go, but they didn't really get enough innings this year, so it kind of puts them on, in the mix at least. more than usual starters for Portland. But it kind of depends on how the team feels about them, if they feel it's worth using a spot for either of those two. And then there's a few relievers. I don't know, Ian. Maybe I'll throw it to you for the relievers, since you've seen a lot of these guys in Portland, and who you think might stand out there.
Yeah, I think that Ben Taylor is pretty much a lock. He's been serving as Portland's closer recently and has had a pretty good statistical season. I think Williams Jerez is likely, especially considering I think there's a non-zero chance he could get taken off the 40-man this offseason, so that AFL could be kind of a last chance to get a look at him and see either if there's trade value or if he's worth keeping around. And then I think maybe if they do go one more reliever, someone like, I think Jalen Beeks, who is working as a starter right now, but I think is ultimately a reliever, is a possibility. Or someone like an Austin Maddox type who, I mean, kind of just is a fungible arm that if they need someone, they could throw there, and he's had a pretty solid year with Portland this year.
Yeah, Maddox does strike me as the kind of guy they usually send, the sort of guy who's been an afterthought, but then you look and it's like, oh, he had a really good year, actually. So he strikes me as a guy they could send. Did we mention Luis Isla? I mean, he seems like he's a guy who they could definitely
Venezuela.
send. Oh, right. Good call.
Because I was going to say that I looked in, yeah.
Good call. I forgot about that. And that's the kind of thing that always happens. Stankiewicz, Stankiewicz is at 118 and 2/3 innings. Last year, he threw with Portland 141. So, yeah, maybe you'd like to get him to that again. McAvoy strikes me as a guy that maybe they could move to the bullpen and send to the Arizona Fall League, because he has struggled this year. He's got an ERA of 5.64. He's allowed 101 hits in 95 innings. Only struck out 70, and I think it's kind of going back to that thing where he talked about with you in spring training, Matt, where he was trying to strike out more guys, and you just wonder if he's kind of getting away from his approach, because granted, while the strikeout rate has gone up from 13.5% to 16.5%, the ground ball rate has also fallen. So you're almost better off with the ground ball rate getting back to where it is. So he's missed some time and could make up innings, but I also wonder if they maybe want to get a look at him in the bullpen down there too. So that could be an option. But yeah, Beeks definitely strikes me as a guy who could go. He has thrown 51 innings in Portland, and he has thrown 67 1/3 in Salem. So that's 118, and last year he was at 145. So he's kind of in the same boat that Stankiewicz is in, frankly, in terms of if they want to get his innings up too. So number of options, but that's kind of, I think, the short list. So anyone else that they send, maybe Ty Buttrey is a guy that I mentioned as a guy who transitioned to the bullpen this year, and maybe they want to work on continuing that transition in the AFL. He could also be an option, frankly, and I think that might not be a bad use, because you've got all kinds of innings now with him that he's not throwing because he's moved into that short inning role. So that's kind of the short list, I think, of guys who the prospect side, or actually one more guy that you mentioned, Ian, Jake Cozart. Maybe worth mentioning real quick.
Oh, yeah, I completely forgot actually I said that. Cozart it's a weird one, because as we kind of talked about, I think when we talked about the Greenville trip, his delivery is brutal in the sense that it puts a ton of stress on his arm. And I think, he's someone that I think I put in the scouting report that the odds of him blowing out are very high. But his numbers since he's been promoted are absurd. He's thrown 7 2/3 innings with Salem, and he struck out 15 guys, walked one, and allowed one hit. Now, he's not pitching very often, which is kind of interesting, and they're having him throw two longer outings, but he's only throwing every 4 or 5 days. But yeah, he's someone who I know just from when I saw him in Greenville, even I thought that you might as well just rush him, because the fastball is what it is. It's legit velocity. The breaking ball is inconsistent, but I don't think it's something that is going to ever be consistent given his delivery. But because of his delivery and how brutal it is, there actually is some deception and some funk in it that makes it really tough and kind of off-putting for hitters. And it's the kind of arm that I think there's only a limited number of bullets, so you might as well try and get them in push it as quick as possible, and try to get some value out of it while you can. So he's someone who I think if they wanted to consider fast tracking, they could put him in the AFL this year and see what happens there. And then with the eye towards just basically more or less starting him next year in the high minors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right, well, I guess real quick, two more things before we wrap up. We've got your reader emails. I want to mention real quick, Ian, you've got a bunch of stuff up on the Scouting Scratch on the news page. We're updating some pro scouting reports, and I'll tweet those out, and we might start putting those up on the news page as well. But you've been to Lowell a lot. A couple of big picture things that you saw there. Anyone sticking out to you? I know one guy that we've been asked about a lot is Bobby Dahlbeck.
Yeah, he's been really good. I don't have his numbers up in front. Maybe you can bring them up.
I can.
But the thing that stands out with him is that he is tooled up. It's a 70 arm at third base, and which makes sense. I mean, he's up to like 96 as a pitcher. Mm-hmm. So the arm is huge, and the raw power is immense. I've seen him hit 2 home runs. I saw him hit 2 home runs a couple of days ago. If you go to my Twitter, you'll see there's video of both of them. It's kind of Inception video where I took video on my phone of my camera playing back the video. So it's one of those. It's a game changer because I was always struggling with I have this video of this thing happening, but I can't get it on Twitter for immediate satisfaction. And
I was wondering how you're getting those consistent.
Then I realized I was like, oh duh, I can just take video out. Yeah, but there's video of him hitting 2 home runs from Friday night. Yeah, Friday. No, Thursday night in Lowell. And the first one is I was sitting with a couple scouts. I know we were talking about it, and we jaws hit the floor when he hit it. It was 430 to right center field, and he's a right-handed hitter. And in Portland, Lowell, they have it's a pretty high wall, and then above the wall, there's some advertising and a Coke or Hood billboard or something that extends probably another 15, 20 feet above the wall, and he cleared all of that. And you just don't see right-handed hitters hit the ball where he did in Lowell. We said I've never seen a right-hander hit it there in Lowell before. And then his next at bat, he hit it completely to right field on a line, just easy power. And that's, I think, the thing. His ability to go to all fields has really stood out, and the power to all fields. Because then the next night, I wasn't unfortunately able to go, but talking to someone who was there, he hit another home run, this time to left field, that was just an absolute missile. And so it's just he's showing power to all fields. He's cut down on the strikeouts, albeit it is a small sample size, and there definitely is going to be swing and miss because he's a big boy. He's 6'4", maybe 6'5", even because he's bigger than C.J. Chatham, who's listed at 6'4". And so there's going to be a lot of swing and miss, and the hit tool was the question, but the raw power is very real, and he's someone who will be making a pretty sizable jump in the next Sox prospect to rankings. Because if he can hit, you're looking at 65, 70 arm, 65, 70 raw power. It's below average run, average defense. That's so you're looking at a 25 home run bat at third base with average defense and a 70 arm. That's a very interesting prospect potentially. So the question is ultimately, can he hit? And that's still TBD. But I've been impressed by what he's been doing. And then of the other guys, CJ Chatham, I have not been as impressed with at the plate. There's a lot he needs to work on there. In the field, he's been pretty good though. So he's someone I'm kind of in a wait and see mode. Need to see a little more from him.
Lingering effects from the thumb.
It could be definitely because he's struggling at the plate. I don't know if you have those up, but I believe
he was struggling.
Power.
Well, let me just say I've got Dahlbeck up. Dahlbeck's hitting 380, 424, 684 in 21 games, 85 plate appearances. He's got 14 extra base hits in 21 games.
Yeah, and what is it? 6 home runs, 8 doubles, I think.
No, 9 and 5.
9 and 5.
So, and I could bring up Chatham real quick here.
I have it right here. He's hitting 222, 259 OBP, 278 slugging. So nothing really.
Yeah, and he really struggled in his rehab assignment with in the Gulf Coast League. He went 0 for his first 6 games. He went 0 for 16 with a hit by pitch. To start that out, and then he had a couple 2 for 4 games before getting moved up. And he was okay for a while after getting called up, but recently he, in his last 6 games, is 4 for 22 for 182 average. He
kind of looks like a tinker at the plate. He'll switch how he's standing mid at bat. Sometimes he's more vertical, sometimes he's more crouched, sometimes he's a little more open. So I wonder if it's just kind of trying to get comfortable at the plate, and if there are lingering effects with the thumb injury. Because in the field, he looks fine. Uh-huh. So he's someone I'm jury's still out. Going to need to see more. And then I guess just quickly, the last two, if you want to read about the relievers, that's on the news page. There's Steven Nogasek, who actually kind of really like as a reliever-only guy. Matthew Gorst, who's actually the news article's kind of out of date because he threw 2 new pitches last night that he didn't throw the first couple of times I saw him.
Yeah, that's really always good when you upload a scouting report about how he hasn't thrown his cutter yet, and without knowing that the guy who wrote it saw him last night and he threw his cutter a lot. Oops.
Well, and he threw a changeup last night, which he'd never thrown before.
Oh, well, there you go.
So he threw
That's
4
fun.
pitches last night, and he'd thrown 2 before, and I'd seen him 2 other times. So, but yeah, I guess the last 2 would be Sean Anderson, who actually was demoted to the GCL, and I am not really. I think he could be hurt. I'm not. I mean, I guess that's speculation, but he hasn't pitched since in over I think a week plus now. Actually, no, since the 4th.
Let me actually throw this out there just because we were talking. What's that?
Oh, no, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, let me just mention, because I just saw this on Twitter, Pat Light has been recalled from Rochester. It's by Minnesota. So.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there you go, Matt. Good call.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, actually, Sean Anderson hasn't pitched since the 4th.
Well, he got sent down to the Gulf Coast League, which it might just be a paper move. Yeah, but, I was going to ask if you had seen him.
Could
that was
could
3
be
weeks
like
ago.
Working with his delivery, or tired from the season, something like that.
Well, because he gave up 12 hits in 2 2/3 innings, and I was at both those starts, and a lot of them were like weak contact, but his stuff was down from what we reported. The fastball was like 90, 92, whereas I guess during the college season it was more like 92, 94. And he did show all secondary pitches, but it was kind of wait and see with him too. And then the last one would be Mike Schwarren, who I think, Matt, you were there also.
Yeah.
Or you.
Yeah.
And so I guess I can just. Yeah, I can just. The velo is like he's 92, 93. I think he was 92, 93, maybe 94, up to 95 with the changeup and a slider, and so the stuff was actually pretty good. Concern I have with him is the delivery. There's a lot of effort in it, particularly on his elbow. He's got the inverted W, and he throws from this like low 3/4 arm slot. But he's an intriguing guy. And he had some buzz. I was talking to some amateur scouts about him, and coming into the year, he was thought of as a legitimate, potential first round pick. And he just kind of, I guess, the stuff regressed this year somewhat, even though he still put up a pretty good statistical season. So he's someone who's pretty interesting. I know, did he say anything when you talked to him? Anything of note?
Yeah, just that I thought maybe he had moved that arm slot in college. I thought I'd read something like that, but he said that's his natural arm slot, and he's pretty much always pitched from the side like that. It almost looks sidearm. I guess it's low 3/4 technically. He walked a few in that outing, but it seemed like he was right on the corner, sort of nibbling a little bit. So it seemed like he had pretty good fastball command overall. And it's a hard fastball. Like Iggy Suarez, the manager, had some good things to say about it. Like, it's really hard with that velocity coming from that angle. And it seemed like he could spot it up to some degree. It's kind of surprising to hear. I mean, I know I read that as well, that he might be a potential first rounder, because like we were saying, it doesn't seem like it's a starter's delivery. So like there's probably good potential there as a reliever, but I don't know. You don't see many starters at that arm angle. I was going to throw one other thing in there too. Schwarren was kind of the guy I liked, and one guy I kind of haven't been that high on is Yohan Ibar. He's obviously got all the tools, and he's very tools up, but he seems kind of like he's very raw, and he's kind of almost like a baby doe, with really long limbs, and he almost like he can't coordinate all of them, and even in the field sometimes it seems like he's a little, I don't know if I want to say lackadaisical, but he's a little too smooth almost, and I don't know. I've seen him make a few sort of mistakes, and you can. Toss that up to being raw, but he's also 19. It's not like he's, a 17-year-old or something. So, I want to see a little more of Yohan Ibar, but he's obviously young, but, and a lot of tools. So, but I'm a little hesitant on him.
Yeah, I think that's definitely warranted at the plate. He's got some issues. The first of which is he's built like a twig, and so he has no upper body strength, and you can see it. He just can't hit velocity really, and he's got this big arm bar in his swing, which is an issue. And as you saw, I think you were there that night. He can get tied up big time on the inner half of the plate. But I do like him defensively, and he can run. But yeah, at the plate, he's got a long way to go. I think someone actually asked me recently on Twitter if he was kind of like a mini Luis Alexander Basabe, and he's much rawer than Basabe was at this stage and has nowhere near the offensive upside. He's got a long way to go, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in Lowell next year to repeat it.
All right. Well, good stuff there. Make sure everybody keeps an eye out on like I said, on the news page and on the scouting reports for updates there. But we want to get to some of your emails pretty quick, and we're already over an hour, so let's get started on that, if that sounds good to you, gentlemen. Our first question comes from frequent podcast emailer Brian, and he says, "Hey guys, could you give an update on Kyrie Washington and Nicholas Hamilton? Whenever I think of Washington, for some reason, a Darnell McDonald-esque player pops into my head, and last year's scouting reports on the draft said Hamilton was already a plus base runner, but very raw since he hadn't played baseball for long. Thanks." First off, I just want to comment on how hilarious that he's asking about Hamilton and Washington, and all that popped into my head was Alexander Hamilton and George Washington, two of the founding fathers. But Ian, why don't you take Kyrie Washington?
D.C. It makes sense.
Exactly. What can I tell you? But why don't you take Kyrie Washington briefly, because he's a player we've talked about on the podcast before, but just coming down, I'll pull up his numbers coming down the stretch here, but in terms of the Darnell McDonald comp, do you think that that's a good comp or not?
I mean, not really. McDonald was a center fielder, which is the first thing. Washington can't play center field. He's a left fielder only. And the same with the speed. McDonald had a lot more speed than Washington. Like Washington's probably, I think, like an average. Maybe I can't remember he's like an average runner. But Washington, he's got power and he can run a little bit, but there's a lot of swing and miss in his game, and it's a left field only profile, which I think really limits his upside. So it's all going to depend on how his hit tool develops. And, right now, I think, it's probably looking at more like an organizational type. But if the hit tool develops, there's a chance for him to get to the big leagues.
Yeah, he's been okay coming down the stretch. Just pulling a random sample since the start of July, he's hitting 204, 306, 328 with 3 home runs. Just to compare from April through June. He hit 289, 323, 559 with 11 home runs. So he's another guy who's kind of been scuffling down the stretch. But again, it's a long season, especially for guys in their first full season. So I'm not, thinking this is anything horrible. But that's Washington. I don't like that comp either, personally. As for Hamilton, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think he's a 70 base runner. He's a double plus. Well, at least speed. He has double plus speed, maybe not base running. That said, last year in the Gulf Coast League, in 49 at-bats, he had 5 hits. He hit 102, 228, 122, so his only power was 1 double. Not a lot of power there. Struck out 29 times in 49 at-bats. Maybe not quite Shaq Thompson-esque, but not a good debut when your OPS is below 400. He was doing a little better this year in 14 games, 42 at-bats. He was hitting 190, 346, 262, and I think he was hitting better than that and kind of scuffled. Yeah, he had a couple of 0 for 3s in his last 2 games. The problem is his last 2 games were on July 19th and 20th, so he's apparently hurt. He hasn't played in a month. Definitely kind of a wild card type guy, but if you're looking at it, he's probably repeating the Gulf Coast League for the second time next year. Repeating it once is never a good thing, but if you're going to have to repeat it a second time, that's, probably not a lot going to happen there. You never know, but, it was a guy they took a flyer on in the 11th round in 2015, given the athleticism there. But hitting a round ball with a round bat, getting square contact is not an easy thing to do. So maybe, something clicks in the offseason, but not necessarily a lot there. But good question. Thank you for the question, Brian. Our next question comes from Brady. And, Brady asked about the 40-man roster situation. We'll talk more about that on the next episode, I think, just because that's a topic that requires a little bit of background in terms of who's going on, who's coming off. So we'll get to that next time. Our next question comes from Nick, frequent podcast emailer. It's not really a question. It just says, Devers, 2 more bombs last night. Promote him now. Playoff experience, be damned. That is all. Okay. Neat. I don't agree, given that, like we said, this email was sent on the 12th, so there was 9 days ago. But that said, I don't see the point in promoting Devers to Portland for 2 or 3 weeks and have him miss the playoff experience in Salem. It's not the I mean, part of it is getting experience in the playoffs, which is a thing that's good for development, but it's also, more at bats, which is always a good thing. Getting a guy more time at the plate, more experience in the field. A lot of reasons to keep him in Salem, so he's not getting promoted. But thank you for the email. Our next email is from Trevor, and Trevor says, fellas, what happened to Christopher Acosta? He was nearly mentioned in the same breath as Anderson Espinoza when they first signed. Now he doesn't seem to be on the radar at all. Thanks and love the podcast, Trevor. We did mention on a past episode of the podcast that Christopher Acosta, we don't have any first-hand information, but he reportedly was he was demoted from the Gulf Coast League to the Dominican Summer League. He wasn't in the Gulf Coast League; it was during extended. But I believe the report, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll correct this when I edit if I'm wrong, but I believe it was reported that it was a off-field reason he was demoted, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was reported. Okay, so he was demoted and apparently just didn't report to the Dominican Summer League, also reported. And so he's on the restricted list right now and not pitching. Obviously not something you want to see from a guy you gave $1.5 million to. So we're going to see what happens to him next year. He's ranked 40th on the Sox prospects rankings right now, basically because if he were pitching and doing what he was supposed to do on and off the field, he would be a top 20 prospect. That's where he was when this news broke. That said, he is also not pitching and not even with a team right now. So, frankly, if we could take him off the board, we would, but we kind of make ourselves rank guys, frankly. So it's kind of a hedge on he's a guy who should probably be in the top 40, but he also may never pitch again for all we know. That's not based on information. It's just saying, he could come back next year and everything will be fine, or he could not pitch again. The range of possibilities are that wide. So we don't really know anything. Yeah. It's tough to talk about because, you hear things and there's rumors always about guys that may or may not be right. So we don't know anything other than what's been reported on that tip. So, but thanks for the email. Our next email comes from Lendell. Lendell says, if Yoan Moncada doesn't come up to Boston this year, could Luis Alexander Basabe be an option? Or I should mention, he just said, could Basabe, which is great because I now know who he's talking about because they traded his twin brother. But could Basabe be an option as the designated pinch runner in September since he needs protection from the Rule 5 draft this offseason anyway? He then also asks, have you guys seen Steven Nagosic yet? As an Oregon native and fan, I'm interested in how he's doing and his timeline to the majors. You've talked about Nagosic. I guess just real quick, timeline to the majors as a reliever could move quickly?
Yeah, I think he could start next year in Portland.
Portland?
Yes.
Wow.
Now,
right.
I wouldn't rule out.
I'd say Salem's more likely. But
I think it's more likely, but I think if they want to be aggressive, they could push him to Portland. But I think what is next year? So maybe early 2018. And if they wanted to be super aggressive, like late next year.
As for Moncada, could Basabe be an option? I think no. He's not even really that fast, right?
Yeah, no, he's not a blazing runner. He's just like a plus runner.
Yeah, if they were to...
I think you were going to say the same thing I was. So
who else could internally be an option? I don't think there really is anybody.
That's what I was about to say, which is why I think I wouldn't be surprised if they went outside the organization like they did with Quintenberry a couple of years ago.
Well, you'd think they would have tried to have gotten that guy by now.
Still a week and a half or whatever. Still got 10 days.
I guess that's true.
I do think it is a role they need to fill because they have no speed off the bench. Like, Chris Young is not really fast, and Benintendi's, if whoever's the bench outfielder isn't like, it's like a solid average of 55 run.
Aaron Hill, Brock Holt.
Yeah, like it's a bunch of average or fringe average runners. So I think that is something we could see them address in the next week or so.
And Rusney Castillo's speed hasn't really played up enough that you would use him in that role.
I mean, Lamar is like a solid average runner also, but yeah, I just don't. There's no one.
Lamar in September, but he's not really like a playoff, like hold a roster.
They don't have that true like 70 runner really at like anywhere other than Moncada. Actually, now that I'm looking, they just don't have a lot of speed in the organization, frankly.
Yeah. So there's that. So we thank you for the questions, though, Lendell. We appreciate it. He's also a lot of frequent podcast emailers, like the repeat customers, but we also like new emailers. So if you've got a new email, if you haven't emailed before, we always welcome those questions. So I got asked on Twitter whether people could ask us off-field questions. For example, no one did this time around, but someone was like, for example, if I wanted to ask Ian about Liverpool or Tottenham Hotspur. Yeah, you're a Tottenham Hotspur guy, right?
Oh, get the hell out of here. Manchester City.
Really? Okay, Man City. Oh, Mioli's the Spurs guy.
Mioli's a Spurs guy.
Right, okay, sorry.
My dad's from Manchester. I've been a City fan my entire life.
Okay.
EPL questions are definitely allowed, though.
Okay, well, I got asked about wrestling. So I'll just read the question in order to. The question is from Brady, who has also a frequent emailer, so we'll read the question. But it's kind of hilarious because it sounds vaguely sexual. But what are Chris's thoughts on the G1 climax? Which I think is hilarious, just because if you don't know what that is, it sounds really sexual. But that's a Japanese wrestling thing. I don't really watch Japanese wrestling, so I don't really have thoughts about it. Although I've heard I've read that it's good stuff to watch, but. Yeah, no real thoughts. Although it's nice that an American won, Kenny Omega, USA. I've been watching a lot of the Olympics lately, though. I'm a big Olympics guy. All right, and our last question that we'll get to. Actually, you sound like you're about to chime in with Olympics thoughts, Matt?
Oh, not really. No, I ran track, so yeah, I'm liking some of the 4x4.
You ran track?
Yeah,
What'd you run?
The 4x4 and the mile in track.
Really? Were you any good?
Yeah. I was all right at the mile. I ran a 5:07 as my top time.
What? Are you kidding me? That
was like that was pretty fast, but I wasn't like a top guy at my school or anything. I was like top 2 or 3 type.
I don't think I've run a mile since like conditioning tests in high school.
Yeah,
I ran cross country, but I was terrible. So. I ran cross country to get in shape for basketball.
God, you guys played such nerdy sports. Baseball, basketball, right here. Let's go.
All right, fair enough. I think I ran a 5:30 as my first mile on a 5K once, but that's like once. Anyway, all right. Our last question is actually from Twitter. So negative reinforcement on me asking people earlier to keep it to email. But Sam asked a question for podcast or Twitter. We're answering it on the podcast, so here you go. How would Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts, Yohan Moncada, and Andrew Benintendi compare at the height of their respective prospect status? In other words, ignoring what we know now and just using their rankings at the time, Betts' value not quite captured, how would you stack them? And I think the Betts part is, Betts peaked mid-year, but mid-year he was a top 10 prospect, I want to say, right? So I think all 4 of those guys were at some point, whether off-season or mid-season, top 10 prospects. Is that right? Because Benintendi, mid-year this year, was consensus top 11. I remember because we put that in the call-up piece that I just read. And Bogaerts was like a preseason number 2 behind Oscar Taveras, I want to say. Moncada was consensus top 10, I want to say, this offseason. And Betts, like we said, was consensus top 10 mid-season. The year he made his debut. So in that sense, they're comparable, but do you guys have quick thoughts on kind of their respective statuses? Usain Bolt, what do you think? That's you, Matt.
Is that me now?
Yes, that's you.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. It's a pretty good question. I want to go in terms of their top status, maybe Bogaerts, Moncada, Benintendi Betts, or Betts Benintendi maybe.
I'd go Betts ahead of Benintendi, but yeah.
Yeah, Bogaerts and Moncada is tough too, because Moncada is he's rated number 1 overall this mid-season, I think, right? But I think like as a shortstop, and Bogaerts showed more power in the minors too. Moncada obviously has more speed, but they're very close. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right, Ian.
Yeah, I think Bogaerts is definitely 1, because I also think that the minors were better back when he was in the minors, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Like, him and Oscar Taveras, I think were considered better prospects than Moncada would be is right now. I think Moncada is 2. I'm actually looking at Betts, and on his baseball reference page, the only rankings they had are pre-2014. He was 75 on BA and 62 on MLB because so he wasn't. That makes sense actually because of course going into 2013 he wasn't ranked anywhere, and then pre-2014 he was ranked, but he was in the majors by 2015, so that was that. So
yeah, I'm looking at the mid-season 2014 Baseball America list right now, and Betts wasn't even on it because he got called up.
Yeah, he was already in the majors, so he never technically on. In terms of
I think they said in a chat he would have been in the top 10.
I mean, in terms of like prospects, like status, he's kind of, I guess, last because he kind of came out of nowhere in the sense in 2013, and then 2014 he was like a nice prospect, but no one thought he would do this. And I mean, I still don't understand how he's doing what he's doing, frankly. I mean, I do, but I get it now. But I never could have foreseen this type of power. So
I guess that's
he's
true.
A special player.
And that the question's interesting to me because it highlights kind of a weakness of prospect lists in that it's a point in time. If you were to only use off-season lists, Betts is by far fourth on that list, right?
Yeah,
because he
definitely.
never was that highly ranked. Whereas, for example, if Bogaerts graduates in 2013, he never was ranked. I mean, he, for example, coming off of playing in a World Series, he was the number 2 prospect in baseball. Because we saw that he could play in the majors. It's kind of like Corey Seager this year. We saw last year that he could play in the majors. Bogaerts, let me see, in the minors in 20. Here we go. I guess pre-2013, BA had him in the top 10.
20, really. Yeah.
He was top 10. He was 8th on Baseball America, 20th on MLB, and 12th on Baseball Prospectus.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
but that would still be behind Moncada. They'll be behind Moncada entering this year.
Yeah. But as I said, I do think that the minors were better back then. In terms of, I don't know. I guess there's no way to test that. But I just feel like just thinking about the guys that he was on the lists with and how many of them have turned into like stars right now. So like, what is it? What's the 2013, right?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. So top 100 prospects 2013 Baseball America list was, let's see. Jurickson Profar, number 1. Injuries have kind of derailed him, but he's hitting this year as a
he's had a
utility
good
guy.
year this year.
Dylan Bundy, injuries kind of derailed him, but he's finally in a rotation and pitching, so that's good, and pitching well. Oscar Taveras, unfortunately, died in a car accident. Rest in peace. Will Myers, as we said the first time we recorded this, Ian corrected me. He's the only 2020 guy in baseball right now, so he's playing very well and playing first base, strangely, which you wouldn't have predicted at that time. Jose Fernandez is a stud. Shelby Miller got the Braves' Dansby Swanson.
He was really good last year.
That's interesting. Garrett Cole, who's very interesting to me. I would not mind seeing him in a Red Sox uniform.
He's had not a great year this year, but he's been one of the top 10 pitchers in baseball the last couple of years.
Yep. Then Bogaerts, followed by Miguel Sano and Byron Buxton of the Twins, who are interesting.
Number 12, though. Or 13, Correa.
Yeah, Correa at 13, Yelich. This is a good list. Taijuan Walker, who still is.
Billy Hamilton at 20, who has
Jameson Taillon at 19, still a guy.
Yep.
Nick Castellanos at 21.
Gossman at 26. Francisco Lindor at 28. Jackie Bradley Jr. at 31. There you go.
All right.
Rendon at 30. Like, this is a really good list.
Well, yeah, Chris Archer at 36.
Springer at 37. Carlos Martinez at 38. Matt Barnes at 40. Yikes. But yeah, this is a good list. Versus
Padres starter Casey Kelly at 45.
Yeah,
there you go.
I guess he's actually not with the Padres anymore.
Yeah,
no. Well, he was then.
The Braves. I saw him this year.
Relief pitcher.
But I think it's. I guess this is. I was saying to you before we started recording this second time. This is actually a really fun exercise, and I think though that maybe if we look back in a few years, we might be saying the same thing now that I think about it about like the Moncada number 1 list. So
you mean internal Red Sox system list?
No. In the sense that like I think that like the minors were better back then, and that's why like Bogaerts being 2 has more weight was kind of what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
And so, like, I guess that's not really a fair thing to say because we won't know until for a couple of years now whether or not, like, you know, the minors were deeper. But I don't know. That was just a general feeling. Because I just think that Bogarts is really good. And
that was
back then. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a really fun question, though.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think those four probably. Has anyone reached the level that those four have at their peaks?
Try to go to the wiki and see.
I mean, I'm looking at the historical rankings, and I mean, because that's what I always say to people. It's like, yes, there was a point at which Will Middlebrooks was the number one prospect in the system, but like in the system right now, he's probably sixth.
Where are the historical rankings?
If you go to soxprospects.com/history.htm.
I'm on the website. I just can't.
Rankings history. It's top left.
Oh, duh. Sorry.
But like, I don't like Lars Anderson. I don't think ever quite reached this level.
No, Swihart didn't. I mean,
Casey Kelly didn't.
Nope.
Buckholz might have.
Wasn't Buckholz like a top 10 prospect?
Buckholz might have.
Look.
Yeah, Buckholz might have. Ellsbury didn't. Oh, Handy Ramirez is probably the last guy I can say with certainty that
he was a top 5, right?
Yeah, he was a top 5 guy.
Let's see. I'm trying to find Buckholz's minor league stats on BREF. There it is. All right, so Buckholz was loading.
Loading? What do you want? Dial up?
Hey, dude, this
buffering.
I don't know what's going on. BREF is being slow right now.
All right, well, I'll get there then because you apparently can't. This is great. This is great radio.
Oh, here we go.
Up.
Oh, Clay Buchholz was the number 4 prospect in the 2008 Baseball America Top 100.
Yeah, number
and
2
number
on BP.
2 on BP. Yeah. So yes, I think
there
Buchholz.
Yeah. So Buchholz is probably the best pitching prospect they've had, hands down. Right? I mean, he has to be.
Yeah.
Maybe Lester. I don't think Lester even got that high.
No, I don't think so either. I was saying this is something we might have to do in the offseason.
Yeah, this is a good offseason question. Thank you for the question, Sam. And that's part of why I pulled it off of Twitter, because it was such a good one. But yeah, all right, well, thank you for the emails, guys. Again, it's podcast@soxprospects.com. We always appreciate hearing from you guys, talking about what you want to hear about, so send those in. And I think with that, we're going to wrap it up. So any parting shots, you guys? I think it's going to be an interesting stretch run, both in the minors and the majors. I'm looking forward to watching it. Looking forward to seeing what these teams do.
Yeah, we got today Henry Owens pitching. He's just started in real life time and opened with a walk and then a strikeout. So doing Henry Owens things. Yeah.
The Henry Owens experience, ladies and gentlemen. Interesting. Well, oh yeah, in the majors, right. Yeah, don't mind me. Yeah, but it'll be good. It'll be cool to see what they do. Sea Dogs and Mets canceled today. Thank you, Rain.
No more Moncada today.
No Moncada. All right.
I think just follow. We're gonna have some content going up.
Content
on a lot of the Lowell guys. So like Bobby Dahlbeck, Chatham, the guys we kind of talked about earlier, and video too. There's actually, I think I have like 3 or 4 videos already on YouTube, just haven't been published yet. So check those out when they go up. Make sure to follow the YouTube page and follow the news page. And yeah, season's wrapping up, but content will not be disappearing. So keep following. As
for the podcast, we should be on. I'm thinking it might make sense, guys, if there are September call-ups to go on, then maybe after the end of the minor league regular season, somewhere around there. So it might be a couple weeks. But hey, if we get a lot of emails, maybe we'll do one quicker. So anyway, thank you for listening, everyone. Follow us on Twitter. Everything's up at the top of the show. Rate and review. Subscribe. We appreciate it. We'll be back at you soon. Definitely at least sooner than this one. So thanks for listening, everybody.